AITA for refusing to let my sister live with me after she lost her job. Even though my husband thinks I'm being cold, I, 36F, have been married to my husband, Greg, 38M, for 8 years. We live in a 3-bedroom house in a mid-sized city, own a small dog, and have a fairly structured routine. Greg and I both have stable jobs. I work in marketing and he's in IT. I value my personal space and have always been very protective of our home environment because it's where I recharge and feel in control. My younger sister, Emma, 32F, has always been a little unstable financially. She's smart and creative, but she's never had a steady career and tends to live paycheck to paycheck. Over the years, she's asked for help multiple times, once borrowing a significant amount of money for an unpaid medical bill, another time asking for help with rent when she moved across the state, and a few smaller instances like car repairs or utility bills. I've helped when I could, but always set boundaries because enabling her lifestyle only seems to make her dependent. A few weeks ago, Emma called me in tears. She had just been laid off from her job at a marketing agency. She said she couldn't afford rent for the next 2 months, and she didn't know what to do. Her initial suggestion was to see if Greg and I could let her stay in our guest bedroom temporarily. I told her I needed to think about it and that I couldn't give an immediate yes. Greg, however, immediately said, "Of course she can stay. She's family. You're being too rigid." He argued that helping family in crisis is a moral obligation and that I was being cold and unloving. I told him our house isn't a hotel and that having someone live here, even temporarily, would disrupt our routines, privacy, and mental space. He said, "It's only temporary. She'll get on her feet quickly." I explained that past patterns suggested otherwise. Emma has a history of staying temporarily for months, sometimes even a year, if she's comfortable. I offered alternatives. I said I could help her financially with a short-term loan or assist her in finding a sublet, a cheaper apartment, or a short-term stay with friends. I even offered to help her update her resume, connect her with networking contacts, and explore unemployment benefits. Greg dismissed these options, saying, "That's not enough. You can't just throw money at a problem. Family needs presence, not spreadsheets." I told him that presence for 2 adults in a small space is going to create stress. I work from home several days a week, and Greg works long hours but values quiet evenings. Emma is emotionally high maintenance. She's prone to crying, venting, and having long conversations that drain energy. I explained that I was worried about the emotional toll on all of us. Greg said I was overthinking and that I should just be compassionate. I finally said I couldn't agree to this. I love Emma, but I cannot have her move in. Greg accused me of being selfish and said that my refusal shows I don't really care about family. He's been distant and resentful since, muttering things like some people are just incapable of empathy. Emma, after hearing Greg pressure me, sent me a long message calling me heartless and unfamily-like, implying that I would rather protect my comfort than help someone who is struggling. I've stuck to my boundaries. I told Emma and Greg that I am happy to provide financial help, advice, and emotional support for my own home, but I cannot accommodate her living here. I suggested she look into temporary housing options, like corporate short-term rentals or Airbnb, or even staying with friends until she gets a new job. She responded negatively, saying none of that feels safe or family-oriented, and that I was refusing the simplest, most obvious solution. My parents are divided. Mom says I'm right to protect my space and that Emma needs to learn independence. Dad says I should bend for family. He believes a sister in crisis deserves a roof over her head, even if it's inconvenient. Greg continues to push me, framing this as me putting material comfort above human kindness. I feel guilty, but I also feel justified. Allowing Emma to move in would likely lead to tension, arguments, and resentment. It would interfere with my work, daily routines, and mental well-being. I've done my best to help her without sacrificing the household stability. I've suggested concrete solutions, offered money and emotional support, and tried to reason with both Greg and Emma. Yet both of them insist that only by living under our roof would Emma be truly helped. I don't want to be estranged from Emma or create permanent rifts with Greg, but I also cannot compromise my home environment and emotional health. I keep trying to find a middle ground, but any suggestion that doesn't involve her moving and seems to be rejected outright. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister live with us after she lost her job, even though my husband thinks I'm being cold and Emma thinks I'm heartless. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. AITA for refusing to let my father stay with me after he criticized my parenting and insulted my house rules. I, 32F, have a 6-year-old son, Leo. I've been a single mom for 4 years, and I do my best to balance work, parenting, and personal life. My father, Greg, 60M, has always had a difficult relationship with me. He can be charming in public, but privately he is controlling, judgmental, and very critical of how I live my life. Despite this, I try to maintain some contact because he is my dad and Leo's grandfather. A few months ago, my father asked if he could come stay with me for a week. He said he wanted to spend time with Leo and help out since he noticed I'm always busy. I hesitated because past visits have often ended in arguments, but I wanted Leo to have a relationship with his grandfather, so I agreed. I clearly told him the rules. No smoking inside the house, no alcohol in front of Leo. He needed to respect my parenting decisions, and that I would need help with the house, not control of it. The first day was fine. He was polite and played with Leo. But on the second day, the issues began. He started criticizing how I was feeding Leo, saying things like he shouldn't be eating that much sugar, or you need to make him eat more vegetables. I calmly explained that I control his diet and know what works for him. He scoffed and said, "You always think you know best, but I raised 3 kids. I know a thing or two." I reminded him that this is my child, and I make the decisions here. He muttered under his breath, but didn't escalate at that moment. Later that day, I asked him to help tidy the living room. He started rearranging my furniture without asking, saying, "This space will work better if you move the couch here, and you really should put the TV over there." I told him to stop and that this is my home, not a place for him to rearrange. He laughed and said, "I'm just helping you think smarter." The next morning, he criticized my cleaning habits, calling my kitchen filthy and Leo's toys disorganized. He also made comments about how I discipline Leo, suggesting I'm too soft and raising a spoiled kid. I had had enough. I calmly told him that if he continued to disrespect my house rules and my parenting, I would have to ask him to leave. He said, "You're being dramatic. I'm just offering advice." I explained again that advice is fine if asked, but constant criticism is not acceptable. By the third day, things escalated further. He drank alcohol in the kitchen in front of Leo, ignored my request to keep the noise down while Leo napped, and made a scene when I asked him to help clean up the dishes after breakfast. He shouted, "You're so uptight. You act like this house belongs to you alone." I reminded him that he agreed to my rules before coming and that I have the right to enforce them. I eventually told him he needed to leave. He refused and claimed I was punishing him and driving a wedge between him and his grandson. I said that respecting boundaries is part of being a guest and that Leo's well-being is my priority. He argued that he knows what's best for Leo and that I'm being unreasonable. At that point, I called a friend to help mediate and eventually got him to leave after a long, tense confrontation. Since then, my father has sent multiple messages claiming I am ungrateful and selfish. He says I'm cutting off his relationship with Leo and that I'm ruining family bonds over minor disagreements. My friends and neighbors who know him are on my side and agree that my boundaries were reasonable, especially since he repeatedly broke them and was disrespectful. Some members of my extended family, however, have criticized me, saying I should let him spend time with Leo no matter what, and that I'm too controlling. I feel torn because I want Leo to have a relationship with his grandfather, but I also don't want my son or me to be exposed to verbal abuse and disrespect in our home. I even offered alternatives, like meeting at a park or having supervised visits, but my father refuses and insists he needs to stay in my house. I've been feeling guilty despite knowing I acted to protect Leo and myself. Part of me worries I overreacted or that I should have handled things differently. But another part of me remembers the constant undermining, insults, and disregard for rules. I've spent years trying to establish a safe and stable environment for Leo, and allowing him to stay would have compromised that. So, AITA for refusing to let my father stay with me after he repeatedly disrespected my parenting and house rules. AITA for refusing to let my sister's fiancé stay in our house after a huge argument that happened during family gathering. I, 34 am, have always considered myself a laid-back person when it comes to family. I'm married with 2 kids, and my wife and I own a modest but comfortable house in the suburbs. My sister, Jessica, 29F, has been dating her fiancé, Mark, 32M, for about 3 years. I've never been super close to Mark. We get along fine, but there's always been a subtle tension that I couldn't quite put my finger on. My sister and I have always had a complicated relationship, sometimes really supportive, other times very competitive, but I've tried to let that slide over the years, especially since she's my sister and family is important to me. A couple of months ago, Jessica and Mark got engaged. As part of the celebrations, my parents and I offered to host an engagement dinner at our house for close family and friends. I was excited to do something nice, and my wife helped me prepare. The day of the gathering, things were normal at first. Everyone was chatting, eating, and drinking, and the mood was good. But then Mark started making these comments that I found extremely inappropriate. He began subtly criticizing our house, commenting on my kids' behavior in a condescending way, and making jokes at my expense in front of everyone. At first, I laughed it off, thinking maybe he was trying to be funny or was nervous, but it quickly escalated. He interrupted conversations, dismissed my wife's cooking as creative but a bit strange, and even made a comment about my career that felt like a personal jab. I finally confronted him privately, telling him that the comments were rude and unnecessary. He said I was overreacting and that I was too sensitive and taking things personally. The confrontation didn't go well, and the tension spilled into the rest of the evening. Jessica noticed the argument, but didn't intervene in a meaningful way. She said Mark was just joking and I was ruining the mood. By the end of the night, the atmosphere was tense enough that some guests left early, and my parents were disappointed because they'd been looking forward to a happy evening. After the dinner, Mark asked if he could stay at our house for a couple of nights because he had some wedding planning to do nearby and it would be easier than commuting from his apartment. I told him no. I explained that after how he had behaved at the dinner, I didn't feel comfortable having him in my home. Jessica flipped out. She called me unreasonable, saying that family should support each other and that I was being petty. She accused me of holding a grudge and said that I was turning our family gatherings into a battleground. I held my ground. I suggested that he could book a hotel and that we could still help with wedding planning, but I would not allow him to stay in our house. Jessica was furious, and we didn't speak for a week. During that time, she sent several passive-aggressive texts implying that I was selfish, that my family's hospitality was being questioned by others, and that I was making Mark feel unwelcome on purpose. I responded politely but firmly, reiterating that after the engagement dinner, I couldn't host him. The situation has now escalated further. Our parents are pressuring me to make peace, saying that I'm causing unnecessary drama before the wedding. Some relatives have taken Jessica's side, telling me that I'm being harsh and that family means supporting each other no matter what. Others have privately told me they understand why I feel the way I do. Jessica has started questioning whether I want to be involved in her wedding at all and hinted that if I don't allow Mark to stay, she might reconsider including us in some pre-wedding events. My wife is firmly on my side, reminding me that a home is a personal space and we have every right to decide who stays there, especially after someone was disrespectful in it. I agree with her, but I can't shake the guilt. I love my sister and want her to be happy, but I also don't want to compromise my boundaries or invite someone into my home who disrespected me and my family. I've considered a compromise, like having Mark stay in the guest house at my parents' property, but Jessica has refused to hear about it, claiming it's still punishing him. I'm starting to wonder if I'm really the asshole here. Am I being too rigid by not allowing my sister's fiancé to stay in our home? Or am I justified in protecting my household and standing by my boundaries? AITA for refusing to let my younger sister's fiancé move into my house rent-free, even though he's family now. I, 34F, have lived in my apartment for about 8 years. It's a 2-bedroom place, which is a little tight, but it works for me. My younger sister, Emily, 27F, has been dating her fiancé, Matt, 29M, for about 3 years. I've met Matt several times, and honestly, he's charming and funny, but he has this habit of leaning on people financially and emotionally in ways that make me uneasy. The story starts a few months ago. Emily and Matt got engaged, and they started talking about moving in together. They were looking at apartments, but their current lease was still active for 6 more months. One evening, Emily called me crying because their landlord raised the rent unexpectedly, and they couldn't afford a new place right now. She suggested that Matt could stay at my apartment temporarily. I was caught off guard. I told Emily I didn't feel comfortable with that. My apartment is my personal space, and while I love my sister, having her fiancé move in rent-free while he looked for work seemed unreasonable. Emily got upset and said, "He's family now. Don't you want to help your family?" I explained that being family doesn't automatically mean I have to support an adult financially. I also mentioned that I have my own bills, and my apartment isn't exactly spacious enough for another adult indefinitely. Emily then guilt-tripped me by saying that if I cared about her and Matt, I would let them stay. She said it would be temporary, just a couple of months until they found a new place. I asked Matt directly if he planned to contribute financially, and he said he didn't have savings right now, but he could chip in with groceries. That's when I drew the line. I told him that helping cover groceries isn't the same as helping with rent, utilities, and all the other costs of living in someone else's home. The argument escalated. Emily accused me of being selfish, and Matt chimed in, saying, "You don't even treat your sister like family." I was shocked because I've always been generous with my sister. I've helped her move multiple times, lent her money when she was in school, and I even paid for her graduation party. But somehow, that didn't count in this scenario. Over the next week, they kept bringing it up. Emily would text me multiple times a day about how desperate they were and how I could make a difference. Matt started calling me almost every evening to discuss logistics, as if I was obligated to say yes. I started feeling anxious and trapped, which made me more resolute in my refusal. Finally, I sent them a long message explaining my stance calmly, but firmly. I said, "I love you both, but I cannot let Matt move in rent-free. I have my own life, and my apartment is my sanctuary. I've always helped you in the past, and I will continue to support you in ways that are reasonable, but letting an adult move in indefinitely without contributing financially is not something I can do. I hope you can understand that." Emily didn't take it well. She accused me of playing favorites and said I was pushing them away. Matt got defensive, implying that I was being unreasonable and unsisterly. Emily said she'd never forgive me if I let Matt suffer for rent while she's powerless. I expected the conversation to end there, but Emily went a step further. She started telling mutual friends that I refused to help family in need. Some friends called me, asking why I wouldn't help them, which was frustrating because I felt painted as the villain. I've never had an issue helping friends or family in real emergencies, but this felt like manipulation rather than necessity. To make things more complicated, a few weeks later, Matt actually found a job, and they signed a lease for a small apartment. Emily sent me a thank you text, but added a passive-aggressive line. "Glad we survived without your help, I guess." I didn't respond because I didn't want to engage in a passive-aggressive exchange. Now, Emily's been distant. She barely talks to me, and when we do see each other at family events, there's tension. Matt acts neutral, but I can tell he's still annoyed about my decision. Our parents have tried to mediate, but I told them the decision was mine to make, and I didn't appreciate being pressured. I'm starting to wonder if I overreacted. Was I wrong to refuse letting Matt move in, even temporarily, given that he's about to be family? Some people are saying I should have just said yes for the sake of family unity, but I can't shake the feeling that doing so would have been unfair to me and my boundaries. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister's fiancé move into my apartment rent-free. AITA for refusing to let my in-laws stay with us indefinitely, even though my husband thinks I'm being unreasonable. I, 33F, have been married to my husband, Kevin, 36M, for 7 years. We have 2 kids together, ages 5 and 2, and live in a 3-bedroom house in the suburbs. For context, Kevin and I both work full-time. I'm in healthcare, and he works in finance. We both have busy schedules and value stability and predictability in our home. I like to think of our house as a place of rest and order, and I try hard to balance work, childcare, and keeping a comfortable environment. Kevin's parents, Linda, 60F, and Robert, 63M, have always been a bit overbearing. They mean well, but they have a habit of imposing themselves. Early in our marriage, we allowed them to stay for a few nights during holidays, and things went fine. But there were also small incidents, leaving dishes piled up, rearranging things in our house without asking, giving our children sugar-heavy snacks against our wishes. Nothing huge, but enough that I noticed their style clashed with ours. I've always tried to be polite and accommodating, but I also set boundaries. The situation started 2 months ago. Linda and Robert called Kevin to say they were thinking about selling their house because it had become too much for them, and that they weren't sure where they'd live immediately afterward. Kevin immediately suggested they stay with us temporarily until they figured something out. I told them I needed details before agreeing, how long they would be here, what rooms they'd use, how it would affect our daily routine. But Kevin waved it off, saying it would be just a few weeks and their family, it's not a big deal. I hesitated. Our house isn't huge, and with 2 kids, 2 dogs, and our work schedules, having 2 additional adults indefinitely would significantly impact our routine. I told Kevin I was uncomfortable with the idea of them moving in without a concrete plan and timeline. He brushed it off, saying I was overreacting, and that family comes first. The real issue started when they arrived. Kevin had told them it would be temporary, but as soon as they were here, they started rearranging furniture, commenting on our decor, and leaving belongings around. Linda began helping with our kids, often ignoring our instructions. Robert started tinkering with our garage tools and plumbing in a way that was disruptive. I asked them politely to follow our house rules, but Kevin would intervene, saying things like, "Come on, let them help," or "You're making a big deal out of nothing." Things escalated when Linda asked if she could keep a permanent closet in our master bedroom, and Robert suggested taking over the basement for their things. I refused both, saying our house isn't big enough for that, and we need to maintain our space. Kevin got upset and said I was being rigid and not welcoming enough. I explained that boundaries are not unwelcoming, and that without limits, this would turn into an indefinite arrangement that disrupts our family. Over the next few weeks, tensions grew. Linda would complain that she wasn't being appreciated, that we didn't ask her opinion on anything, and that she felt unwelcome. Robert kept asking Kevin to let him fix things he didn't need to fix and criticized our organization. Every time I brought up concerns, Kevin accused me of being selfish and not valuing family. He also started saying that our kids might feel upset if we weren't accommodating his parents, which I found manipulative. I tried to compromise. I offered that they could stay for a week at a time and suggested looking at rental options or senior living arrangements for the longer term. Kevin refused to enforce these limits, saying it would hurt their feelings. I reminded him that there are limits to what we can provide without harming our own family stability. He accused me of choosing comfort over family. The breaking point came last week. Linda insisted on taking one of our children, the 5-year-old, to her home for the night without asking me. I said no. Our child's routine and comfort are my responsibility. Kevin argued with me in front of them, saying I was too controlling and that I never let the grandparents see the kids enough. The argument escalated, and the kids were visibly upset. Eventually, I had to insist firmly, and they left angry. Kevin has barely spoken to me since. Our friends and some family have told me I'm right to set boundaries and protect my household. Others say I'm being harsh and that grandparents deserve flexibility. Kevin's mother now texts him every day about how mean I am and how unwelcoming our home is. Kevin keeps framing my stance as hostility toward his parents and says I am making things worse. I feel like I've tried to balance kindness with practicality. I offered temporary help, I've suggested alternatives, and I've tried to communicate clearly. Yet Kevin insists that allowing them to stay indefinitely is the only kind thing to do. I also worry about our mental health, the children's routine, and my ability to manage the household if they stay. I'm starting to question myself. Am I really being unreasonable, or is this a matter of enforcing necessary boundaries? I don't want to hurt Kevin's relationship with his parents, but I also cannot compromise my family's stability. So, AITA for refusing to let my in-laws stay with us indefinitely, even though my husband thinks I'm being unreasonable and cold. AITA for refusing to let my fiancé invite his estranged brother to our wedding after he disrespected me and my family. I, 30F, have been engaged to my fiancé, Jake, 32M, for almost a year. We met 6 years ago, and things have generally been good between us. We've been planning our wedding for about 8 months now, aiming for a small, intimate ceremony with close family and friends. We both agreed early on that we wanted a wedding that feels personal and reflects us, not just a massive gathering to please extended family. Jake has an older brother, Ryan, 35M, who has been estranged from him for over 10 years. From what Jake has told me, their relationship ended because Ryan was manipulative, controlling, and treated Jake badly throughout their youth. Over the years, Ryan has occasionally tried to reconnect, but Jake has always declined, saying it wasn't worth reopening old wounds. About a month ago, out of the blue, Jake mentioned that Ryan had reached out again, asking if he could come to the wedding. Jake said Ryan promised he'd be on his best behavior, and that he really wanted to be part of our day. I told Jake I didn't feel comfortable inviting him. My reasons were twofold. First, I had never met Ryan in person and had only heard about him through Jake's stories, which painted a pretty negative picture. Second, I didn't want to risk drama on our wedding day. I explained that it's our wedding and that we have the right to decide who we invite. Jake got upset. He said I was being overly protective and that he deserved a chance to reconnect with his brother. I reminded him that he had chosen not to have a relationship with Ryan for years, and now suddenly inviting him to the wedding felt like it could undo all the boundaries he had set. He insisted it was different because this is a special occasion. A few days later, Jake brought up a compromise. He said Ryan could come to the reception only, not the ceremony. I reluctantly agreed to consider it, thinking it might be a way to keep the peace. But then I started looking back at some stories Jake had told me about Ryan's past behavior, and I became increasingly uncomfortable. According to Jake, Ryan had once spread a rumor that caused Jake to lose a job opportunity, had borrowed money and never repaid it, and had a pattern of being verbally abusive. This made me rethink any kind of compromise. I expressed my concerns to Jake again. I said that if Ryan came, there was a significant risk he could cause tension, make disrespectful comments, or create an awkward situation for everyone involved. I emphasized that the wedding is not just about reconnecting broken relationships, but also about celebrating a loving and safe environment for our families and friends. Jake argued that I was holding grudges against someone I've never met, and that I was influencing him unfairly. Things escalated further when Jake sent Ryan a tentative, maybe, invitation without telling me. When I found out, I was furious. I told Jake that this was disrespectful and that he should not have extended even a tentative invitation without consulting me. He said I was being controlling and that I needed to trust him to make his own decisions. I pointed out that weddings are a joint decision and that this day belongs to both of us, not just him. Jake started bringing up examples where he claimed I was controlling in other aspects of wedding planning, like the guest list, decorations, and seating arrangements. He said I was being too rigid and not allowing him any agency. I tried to explain that my concerns about Ryan were not about control, but about protecting the emotional environment of our wedding. I reminded him that inviting someone who has a history of causing harm to him could not only ruin the day, but also potentially damage our relationship. In the past 2 weeks, the tension has grown. Jake has been quieter, distant. and occasionally sarcastic. Ryan, apparently, has been texting Jake almost daily about how he hopes to be included and how he's changed and just wants to celebrate this milestone with family. I've seen some messages, and while they sound polite, I remain skeptical given the history Jake shared with me. I spoke with my parents about this situation. They fully support me and agree that inviting Ryan could lead to unnecessary drama. Jake's parents, however, have taken Ryan's side and suggested I let Jake handle this and that I should give family a chance to reconcile. They say I'm being selfish by putting my feelings above family reconciliation. I've tried to compromise in other ways. I offered to meet Ryan before the wedding in a neutral setting or have a mediated conversation with Jake present to see if a relationship could be rebuilt gradually. Jake said that would take the magic out of the wedding and insisted on either inviting him or cutting off the idea entirely. I explained that cutting him off entirely is what I feel is safest for all parties. I feel guilty because I know Jake wants a relationship with his brother, and I don't want to come between them. But I also feel like I'm protecting our wedding day and, frankly, my mental well-being. I want our wedding to be joyful, not overshadowed by potential conflict. Jake keeps telling me that I'm being unreasonable and that he can't believe I'm making him choose between me and his brother. I feel like he's framing it as a personal attack rather than understanding my concerns about safety and peace during the event. So, AITA for refusing to let my fiancé invite his estranged brother to our wedding after he has a history of disrespect and potentially harmful behavior. AITA for refusing to let my sister's fiancé walk our dog after he disrespected me in front of my kids. I, 34F, have a pretty tight-knit family, and I'm very protective of my two kids, ages 8 and 5. We live in a suburban neighborhood, and we have a medium-sized rescue dog, Max, who is very well-behaved but can be a little shy around strangers. Max has been with us for 6 years, and my kids have grown up with him. Walking him is usually my job, sometimes shared with my husband, 36M, and occasionally with my older sister, Emily, 32F. Emily has been dating this guy, Darren, 35M, for about a year. Darren seems fine on the surface, polite and friendly, but I've noticed little things that bother me. He's condescending sometimes, interrupts people mid-sentence, and has this habit of correcting kids' behavior in ways that feel more like criticism than guidance. Emily doesn't see it as a big deal, but I have. Last weekend, Emily and Darren came over for our usual Sunday family brunch. The weather was nice, so I decided to take Max for a walk with the kids afterward. My husband was around, helping with cleanup, so it was just me, the kids, and Max. While I was getting Max's leash ready, Darren said, "Oh, I can walk him for you. You got your hands full with the kids, right?" I politely said, "Thanks, but we're all set." I actually like having Max with the kids. It's good for them to practice responsibility and learn about animals. Darren shrugged and said, "Suit yourself," and sat on the porch. The walk went fine, but on the way back, Max got a little tangled in a bush. Nothing serious, just his leash got caught on a branch. He started yelping because he was scared. My youngest started crying, and I was trying to untangle Max while keeping the kids calm. Darren came over, laughed, and said, "Wow, you really can't handle a dog and kids at the same time, can you? That poor thing is going to need therapy after this." I froze. I don't take well to insults about my parenting or how I handle my dog. I told him, firmly but calmly, I don't appreciate that comment. I'm doing my best. He just smirked and walked back to the porch, and Emily didn't say anything. I finished the walk, took Max home, and tried to shake off the tension, but I was simmering inside. Later that evening, Emily mentioned that she and Darren were planning to come over midweek to help with the kids and maybe walk Max since you're so busy. I paused. Busy? I literally work from home part-time and have no major schedule conflicts. But the bigger issue was that after what happened last weekend, I didn't feel comfortable having Darren handle Max or the kids. I told Emily, "Thanks for the offer, but I don't think Darren walking Max is a good idea right now. Maybe we could just meet for coffee instead." Emily looked hurt and said, "Why not? He's your brother-in-law-to-be. He was just joking last weekend." I explained, it wasn't a joke to me. He belittled me in front of my kids, and I don't trust him around them right now. Walking Max is part of managing the kids, and I need to feel confident that whoever's helping is respectful. Emily got defensive and said I was overreacting and that I was making him look bad for no reason. She added, "You're always so uptight. You can't even let anyone else do a simple task." We argued for a while, and it ended with her saying, "Fine, but you're being unreasonable and it's going to make him look like the villain when we talk to our parents." I thought about it over the next few days. I genuinely didn't want to create family drama, but I also didn't want to risk Max or the kids feeling unsafe or embarrassed. My husband was on my side, saying that Darren's attitude last weekend was unacceptable and that I was right to set boundaries. Yesterday, Emily texted me asking again if Darren could walk Max, and I said no. She responded with a long message about how I was damaging their relationship and that I need to lighten up and that Darren is perfect with Max and the kids. You just don't see it because you're always controlling everything. I didn't reply. Now my parents are asking questions because Emily has apparently been talking to them, and they are upset, saying I'm being harsh. I feel like I'm standing my ground for my kids and Max, but I also feel guilty that I might be causing a rift with my sister. So, Reddit, AITA for refusing to let my sister's fiancé walk our dog after he disrespected me in front of my kids. Additional context. Darren has never shown physical aggression, but his tone can be dismissive or mocking. Max is friendly but timid, and my youngest child gets very upset when people are mean to the dog. Emily seems unwilling to see Darren's behavior as anything other than harmless teasing. AITA for refusing to let my sister's fiancé stay in my house after he humiliated me in front of my family. I, 32F, have always been close with my younger sister, Jenna, 28F. We grew up in a small town, and even as adults, we've remained very tight. We live about an hour apart now, but I visit her regularly, and she visits me. Our parents have been divorced since I was 14, and we share a lot of family responsibilities, from holidays to caring for our aging dad. Last year, Jenna got engaged to her long-term boyfriend, Mark, 30M. I'll be honest, I never really liked Mark. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt because he seemed fine on the surface and I wanted my sister to be happy, but there were always little things that rubbed me the wrong way. He's loud, overbearing, and has this way of turning conversations toward himself. But my sister loves him, so I try to keep my opinions to myself. Fast forward to last month. My parents were coming over for a small family gathering at my house. I decided to keep it intimate, just me, my parents, and my sister. Jenna called a few days before and told me that Mark wanted to come as well. I said, "Honestly, I prefer it to just be us this time. We can catch up with him another time." Jenna sounded disappointed, but agreed. The day of the gathering arrives. We're having a nice, quiet evening. My parents are in the living room, and I'm in the kitchen putting together a charcuterie board. Jenna comes in and whispers that Mark is outside and really wants to come in. I reiterate that this is a family-only night and he can't. She sighs and says she'll talk to him. About 20 minutes later, Mark walks in anyway. I politely ask him to step outside, but he ignores me and starts making a scene in front of my parents. He says, "Why are you trying to keep me out? I'm part of the family now, aren't I?" I try to calmly explain that I invited only immediate family and that we had already talked about this. He starts raising his voice, calling me selfish and controlling. My sister sits there silently, looking uncomfortable. My parents are shocked. I finally lose my patience. I tell him he needs to leave or I will call a cab for him. He refuses, and at that point, I tell my parents I'm going to ask him to leave again. When I go to confront him, he grabs my arm and says, "You've always been jealous of me. You hate that Jenna is happy." I pull away and firmly tell him he's crossing a line and that he's no longer welcome in my home tonight. He leaves, muttering under his breath. Afterwards, my sister is fuming. She calls me and says I embarrassed her and Mark in front of our parents. She says that I overreacted and that I should have been more accommodating since he's her fiancé. She's been avoiding me since that night, and my parents are caught in the middle. They understand why I asked them to leave, but they're also upset that my sister and I are now distant. My friends and coworkers have mixed reactions. Some say I was right to enforce my boundaries, but others say I should have just let him come to avoid family tension. I feel like letting him in after the way he treated me would have been giving in to disrespect. On the other hand, I can't shake the feeling that I might have escalated things and damaged my relationship with my sister. So, Reddit, AITA for refusing to let my sister's fiancé stay in my house after he humiliated me in front of my family. I'm happy to clarify details if needed, but I wanted to stick to the main events. The aftermath has been tense. My sister hasn't returned any of my calls, and I feel like I'm stuck between enforcing my boundaries and repairing my relationship with her. My parents have suggested a family meeting, but I don't know if it's worth it if Mark is going to be involved. I want to be fair to my sister, but I also don't want to let someone treat me like that again. I feel guilty for the distance it's created, but I also feel justified in standing my ground. I'm not sure if there's a compromise that doesn't involve one of us feeling disrespected. This has been weighing on me heavily. I want my sister back in my life, but I also can't ignore the fact that Mark crossed boundaries that night in a way that felt really personal and aggressive. I'm looking for perspective. Did I handle this the wrong way, or was I justified in refusing him entry? The situation has escalated to the point where my parents are worried it might cause a permanent rift between me and my sister. I haven't contacted her since the incident because I want to give her space, but I also fear that not reaching out might make things worse. I realize that family dynamics are complicated and that sometimes the right choice isn't obvious. But I also know that my home is my sanctuary, and I need to feel safe and respected there. The conflicting advice I'm getting from friends is only making me more anxious. I've been thinking about trying to talk to Jenna again in a calm, neutral setting without Mark present to explain my perspective and hopefully find a way to move forward. But I'm nervous about reopening the conversation if she isn't ready. Ultimately, my goal is to maintain my relationship with my sister while also preserving my boundaries and self-respect. I'm hoping to get some clarity on whether I truly overstepped or if I was simply enforcing reasonable limits. I'm prepared for some harsh feedback, but I really want honest opinions. Was I the asshole for refusing to let my sister's fiancé stay in my house after he humiliated me? Or were my actions justified? Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for refusing to let my husband's brother move in after he lost his job. Even though my husband says I'm being selfish, I, 34F, have been married to my husband, Matt, 36M, for 9 years. We have 2 kids together, ages 6 and 3, and live in a 4-bedroom house that we bought 3 years ago. For context, we both have full-time jobs. I work in healthcare, and Matt works in IT. Our house is our sanctuary, and I've always been someone who values routines and boundaries. I work long hours, often bring work home, and after that, taking care of the kids and maintaining the house is already a full-time job in itself. Matt's younger brother, Jake, 30M, has always had a bit of a tumultuous life. He's smart, funny, and generally well-meaning, but he's never held a steady job for long. Over the years, he's moved around frequently, and while Matt has occasionally helped him financially, I've always drawn a firm line on letting him stay in our home for more than a couple of days. Jake has a history of staying with friends or family temporarily and overstaying indefinitely. 3 weeks ago, Jake called Matt to say he lost his job and had been evicted from his apartment. He didn't have anywhere else to go and asked if he could move in with us for a little while. When Matt told me, my first reaction was concern for Jake. I wanted to help in some way, but I also immediately thought about our household, the kids, and the practicalities. I asked Matt how long he thought Jake would stay, what room he would take, and how he would contribute to rent and household expenses. Matt said he didn't know yet, but he insisted it wouldn't be a problem and that I should just say yes because he's family and needs help. I explained that I couldn't agree to an indefinite arrangement without clear boundaries. I mentioned that adding another adult to our household would affect our kids' routines, our work schedules, and the household dynamic. I offered alternatives, helping Jake find a short-term rental, lending him money to cover temporary housing, helping with job hunting, or even letting him stay for a fixed, clearly defined week while we figure out a plan. Matt said, "No, that's not enough. He needs a roof over his head right now, and we're his family. You're being selfish." Jake arrived a few days later. Matt had told him he could stay as long as he needed. Initially, things were manageable. He stayed in the guest bedroom, helped with a few chores, and the kids were excited to have him around. But after the first week, he started leaving dishes in the sink, spending hours on the couch playing video games, and generally not contributing to household responsibilities. He also began giving unsolicited advice about how we manage the kids, which I found intrusive and stressful. I brought my concerns to Matt, asking him to talk to Jake about helping around the house and respecting our rules. Matt said I was overreacting and that Jake was just trying to relax and regroup. I reminded him that this wasn't temporary anymore. It was becoming a situation where an adult was living with us without contributing, and I couldn't sustain this long term. Matt accused me of being cold and unsupportive and said I was treating family like strangers. Things escalated when Jake started borrowing our car without asking, raiding the fridge for snacks, and occasionally ignoring our kids' bedtime routines. I told him directly that this was not acceptable and set clear rules about car use, food, and kid schedules. He sulked, and Matt got upset with me, saying I was making things hostile and that Jake needed to feel welcome. I've tried compromises. I've told Jake he's welcome to stay for one more week while we help him find temporary housing. I offered to help financially with deposits, rent, and utilities for a short-term place, and I've helped him look for jobs online. Matt refuses to enforce the timeline, insisting that Jake can stay as long as he needs. He has started making passive-aggressive comments about me being uncaring in front of Jake, which makes things even more tense. Jake seems frustrated with me too, saying I don't treat him like family and that I don't understand what it's like to struggle. I explained that I do understand struggle, but our home has to function for our immediate family first. I've emphasized that helping him find housing and supporting him financially temporarily is not refusing help. It's just balancing responsibilities. Friends and some relatives think I'm right to set boundaries and protect my household. Others say I should just open my home and trust that Jake will adapt. Matt keeps insisting that I'm being selfish, accusing me of prioritizing comfort over family and making him feel caught in the middle. I feel guilty because I love Jake and I want to help, but I also feel frustrated that Matt dismisses all my concerns and wants to turn our home into an open-ended shelter for an adult who has a history of overstaying. I'm already stretched thin with work, kids, and household responsibilities, and I can't compromise the stability of my own family for an indefinite period. I'm starting to wonder if I'm wrong, but I also feel like enforcing boundaries is necessary. I want to help, but in a sustainable way that doesn't disrupt our household. So, AITA for refusing to let my husband's brother move in indefinitely, even though my husband says I'm being selfish and unsupportive. AITA for refusing to let my brother and his wife bring their newborn to my wedding after they broke several boundaries during the planning process. I, 29F, am getting married in about 4 months to my fiancé, Sam, 32M. We've been together for 7 years and have been planning a relatively small wedding of around 80 guests. We wanted something intimate, mostly close friends and immediate family, and both of us agreed that our wedding would be adult-focused. While we love children, we decided not to have kids attend the ceremony or reception because we want everyone, including ourselves, to be fully present and enjoy the day without the additional stress of supervising kids. My brother, Matt, 31M, and his wife, Laura, 30F, recently had a baby, Lily, who is now 3 months old. I've always been close to Matt, but Laura and I have had a tense relationship, mostly because she tends to push boundaries and ignores requests for compromise. When they announced the birth, I congratulated them, but also reminded them about our wedding plans and the adult-only policy. I thought that would be the end of the discussion. About 2 weeks after we sent out the invites, Matt texted me, saying they were planning to bring Lily anyway because it's family and she should be included. I was surprised and immediately explained that our wedding was adult only and that this rule applies to all children, regardless of family status. I offered that they could come, of course, but that Lily would not be in the ceremony and that we had arranged a small play area with babysitters at the reception if they wanted Lily to attend part of the evening. Matt responded angrily, saying, "It's our child. She's family. You're being unreasonable, and it's your job to accommodate your family. I tried to remain calm and reiterated that it is our wedding, and that while we want Lily to be part of the day in age-appropriate ways, she cannot attend the ceremony or roam freely during the reception. Laura then chimed in, sending a long message that accused me of trying to control her parenting and prioritizing some friends over family. She also implied that my decision was cold and unloving. At this point, I felt like any attempt at compromise was being twisted into personal attacks. The conflicts didn't stop there. During the planning process, Laura repeatedly suggested things that contradicted our wedding plans. She tried to influence the seating chart, the food menu, and even the timing of the ceremony, insisting that we consider Lily's needs. She sent me texts at all hours, sometimes multiple times a day, telling me that our plans were unfair to families with children. She also criticized our choice of venue, claiming it wasn't child-friendly enough and insisting that we change it. I politely declined every suggestion, but the tone became increasingly passive-aggressive. 2 weeks ago, Matt dropped by unannounced, saying he wanted to talk in person about Lily attending the wedding. I was in the middle of planning, and I told him I didn't have time, that we had already discussed it, and that their stance was not acceptable. He got upset, saying I was being rude and dismissive, and Laura called me later, yelling that I was trying to punish them and forcing them to leave their child behind. They both accused me of being selfish and suggested that my refusal would create a permanent rift in the family. I tried to offer other solutions. I said they could bring a close relative or a babysitter to supervise Lily in a separate room during the ceremony and early reception, and then they could join us later. I even offered to cover the babysitter's cost. They refused every compromise and insisted that they would only attend if Lily could be with them the entire time. My parents are divided. My mom thinks I am right to set boundaries and is frustrated with Matt and Laura for being disrespectful. My dad, however, keeps telling me to be flexible and that I should put family first. He suggested I might hurt Matt's feelings and make Laura resent me, which only adds to my stress. Some of my cousins have also weighed in on social media, saying I'm being overly strict and mean for not accommodating Lily. This has made me second-guess myself at times, but deep down, I know that the wedding is our day, and my primary concern is that everyone, including Sam and me, has a safe, peaceful, and enjoyable experience. Sam is fully supportive and agrees that setting boundaries is necessary. He reminds me that compromise doesn't mean letting others override our decisions or disrespect us. He has also helped me communicate with Matt and Laura, trying to keep everything civil, but they continue to push back. I feel frustrated and guilty at the same time. I don't want to create conflict or alienate my brother, but I also feel that giving him would send a message that it's acceptable for guests to ignore boundaries and manipulate situations to suit themselves. I've considered letting Lily attend just the reception, but I worry that Laura will still cause drama and that it will distract from the ceremony. I've also thought about having a mediated conversation with both of them, but they seem unwilling to meet halfway at all. So, AITA for refusing to let my brother and his wife bring their newborn to my wedding after they broke several boundaries during the planning process and refused all compromises. AITA for refusing to let my brother's fiancée plan my wedding. So, this is going to be long because there's a lot of background, and I want to make sure I give the full picture. I, 28F, have been engaged to my fiancé, Mark, 30M, for about a year now. Our wedding is planned for next summer, and we've been pretty hands-on with everything: venue, guest list, theme, etc. For context, my brother, Ryan, 32M, has been dating his fiancée, Claire, 29F, for about 3 years. Ryan and I have always been close, but Claire and I, not so much. She's a nice enough person on the surface, but I've had several incidents that rub me the wrong way, mostly about her controlling tendencies and how she tries to insert herself into situations where she doesn't belong. Recently, my brother and Claire came over for dinner, and during the meal, Claire casually mentioned she'd love to help with wedding planning because she's great at organizing events and always makes everything look amazing. I try to brush it off with a polite thanks, but we've got it covered, but she insisted. She started bringing up color palettes she liked, flowers she thought would pop, and even venues she thought were better suited for our guest list. I felt uncomfortable because she was being very assertive, almost like she assumed she had some sort of authority in our decisions. A few weeks later, I got an email from Claire with a 15-page document outlining her suggestions for our wedding, including mood boards, seating charts, and even a draft of the ceremony script. I was taken aback. We hadn't asked for her help, and it felt like she was trying to take over. I tried to respond gently, thanking her for the effort, but reiterating that we were managing the wedding ourselves. She replied, saying she just wanted to make sure it's perfect, and that since she's family too, she should have a say. I talked to my brother about it, and he said I was overreacting and that Claire was just trying to help. He suggested I compromise a little to make her feel included. I explained that I wasn't comfortable letting someone dictate my wedding plans, especially someone I don't get along with. He sighed and said he'd talk to her, but that conversation never seemed to happen. Things escalated when she showed up at our engagement party with a scrapbook she had put together for inspiration. She presented it to me in front of all our friends and family, expecting me to go through it with her. I politely skimmed it and told her again that we appreciated it, but had our own plans. She made a small comment about how she thought my ideas were a bit bland, and that we could make it more exciting if I just let her take over. I was furious and embarrassed. After that, I decided I needed to set firm boundaries. I sent a message to Claire explaining very clearly that while I appreciated her intentions, the wedding planning was something that Mark and I wanted to do ourselves, and we did not want her input unless explicitly asked. I also asked my brother to back me up, and he said he would, but he did not speak to her directly. When I blocked her from our wedding planning group chat and politely declined her further suggestions, she called me and left a voicemail crying about how she felt rejected by her own family and that I was being overly controlling. She said that I was turning this into a power struggle and that maybe I didn't want her involved because I couldn't handle someone competent helping. I didn't respond, and my brother has been visibly stressed since then because he feels caught in the middle. Our families are now divided. Some relatives think I'm being unreasonable and should let Claire have her moment, since weddings are about family coming together. Others support me, saying it's my day and I have the right to set boundaries. My parents are frustrated because they don't want to see tension between siblings or ruin the wedding atmosphere. I honestly feel like I'm in a no-win situation. I don't want to allow Claire to overstep and make our wedding about her ideas, but I also don't want my brother to resent me for standing my ground. I've considered inviting her to a very minor role, like helping with favors or something small and contained, but even that feels like giving in. So, Reddit, AITA for refusing to let my brother's fiancée take part in my wedding planning, despite her insistence that she's just trying to help. AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding after she tried to guilt me over a family tradition. I, 32F, have a complicated relationship with my younger sister, Emily, 29F. Growing up, we were very close, but over the past few years, our differences have become more pronounced, especially when it comes to family expectations and personal boundaries. Our parents have always been very traditional, especially about celebrations and family obligations, and that has caused tension between us at times. Emily recently got engaged to her boyfriend, Mark, 31M, and the wedding planning has been full of drama. She's the type who wants everything perfect and extremely traditional. She's been very particular about who attends, what roles people play, and especially who sits where during the ceremony and reception. At first, I tried to stay out of it and just offer support where I could, but things escalated when she started insisting on something I found unreasonable. Growing up, our family had this tradition of the older sibling giving a speech at the younger sibling's wedding. Emily started reminding me about it as soon as she got engaged. At first, it was subtle, like, remember, it's our tradition, but then it became more direct, and she began dropping hints and guilt-tripping me over not committing to a speech. I have always been very uncomfortable speaking in front of large groups, and public speaking triggers severe anxiety for me. I told her multiple times that I would not feel comfortable giving a speech, but she dismissed it, saying things like, "It's just a tradition. You've done it before for me in family settings, or everyone expects it. It would look bad if you didn't do it. I explained that family settings were very different from standing in front of 150 people at a wedding. I also mentioned that forcing me to speak would make me extremely anxious and potentially ruin my experience at the wedding, but she kept pushing, framing it as if I was being selfish or not valuing our relationship. It got to the point where she started saying things like, "I can't believe you'd make my big day about your fears, and our parents are really disappointed. They expected you to honor this tradition." I felt cornered and hurt because I had never refused her anything before, and now she was turning the entire family against me just for wanting to protect my mental health. The situation came to a head when she sent me a long message saying that if I didn't give the speech, she would assume I didn't care about our family or her happiness, and that I wasn't really supportive. That message made me feel manipulated and like my personal boundaries were being completely ignored. I replied that I would attend the wedding as a guest, but I would not give a speech under any circumstances. I thought that was a reasonable compromise, but apparently it wasn't enough. After that, she started contacting other family members, painting me as the villain who refuses to participate in important family moments. I started getting messages from our parents and cousins asking why I was being so difficult and whether I was going to embarrass Emily on her wedding day. I tried explaining my anxiety and my reasons, but most of them seemed to side with Emily because they believe traditions should be honored above personal discomfort. A few days later, she sent me another message that completely crossed the line. She said that if I wasn't willing to give a speech, she would rather I not attend at all, because my presence without the speech would feel hollow and disrespectful. At this point, I realized that attending under these conditions would mean being subjected to judgment, guilt, and possibly outright shame throughout the day. I knew I could not handle that, so I sent her a message saying I would not attend the wedding. I explained calmly that this decision was about protecting my mental health, not about punishing her or refusing to celebrate her marriage. I also offered to meet her before or after the wedding to celebrate privately, but she didn't respond to that offer. Since then, things have blown up. Emily has called me selfish, cruel, and even accused me of ruining our relationship forever. My parents are upset and have been trying to mediate, but it's clear they are leaning toward Emily. Some extended family members have reached out to ask why I wouldn't attend my own sister's wedding, and I feel like I'm being painted as the bad sibling for standing up for myself. On the other hand, I have felt a huge sense of relief since I made the decision, because I know attending would have caused me extreme anxiety and possibly led to an embarrassing meltdown in front of everyone. I've also started feeling guilty, wondering if maybe I overreacted or if I should have just gone and suffered through it to maintain appearances. I guess my main question is this: am I the asshole for refusing to attend my sister's wedding because she tried to force me into giving a speech that would make me extremely anxious? I know it's her special day, and I want her to be happy, but I also feel like my personal boundaries and mental health should matter. The situation has left me feeling torn between standing up for myself and being a supportive sister. Has anyone else experienced something like this? I really want to understand whether I'm in the wrong or if setting boundaries like this is reasonable. AITA for refusing to let my mother move in with me after she repeatedly insulted my husband and tried to control our household. I, 33F, have been married to my husband, Ethan, 35M, for 7 years. We've always had a solid, loving relationship, and we recently bought a house together. Life has been busy but manageable. We both work full-time, share household responsibilities, and support each other's hobbies and ambitions. We also agreed early on that our home would be a space for our nuclear family, meaning just the two of us with the occasional visit from extended family. About 6 months ago, my mother, Linda, 58F, approached me with the idea of moving in temporarily. She recently retired and claimed she was lonely and needed family around. Initially, I was hesitant but tried to be supportive. I told her we could consider a short-term visit, maybe a week or two, to see if she could adjust to living with us. She insisted it would be only a couple of months and promised to respect our household rules. From the very beginning, things started going downhill. She arrived with the mindset that she would immediately integrate into our home as if it were hers. She began criticizing everything from the way I cooked to how we arranged the furniture to Ethan's hobbies. She made repeated comments about Ethan, calling him lazy for spending a night gaming or childish for not immediately joining her in what she considered productive household tasks. She also implied that my career and social life were secondary to her presence, telling me that I should prioritize family over work and that Ethan should be more of a man and help around the house. Ethan and I tried to set boundaries politely. We explained that while we wanted her to feel comfortable, she needed to respect our schedules, chores, and personal time. She agreed initially, but then started undermining us in subtle ways. She would rearrange our kitchen and throw away food she didn't consider fresh enough, criticize our budget, and make passive-aggressive remarks like, "Well, some people just don't manage money well, I guess." She also tried to control how Ethan spent his evenings, suggesting he should help her organize her hobbies or go for walks with her instead of spending time with me or relaxing. The tipping point came when she started criticizing Ethan directly during meals and gatherings. She said he wasn't ambitious enough, that he let me do all the hard work, and even compared him unfavorably to my ex-boyfriends. Ethan confronted her calmly, asking her to stop insulting him in his own home. She responded by saying he was overreacting and that he needed to toughen up. I supported Ethan, telling my mother that her behavior was unacceptable and that she could not continue living with us if she refused to respect our home and our marriage. She reacted extremely badly. She accused me of choosing my husband over my mother and of shutting her out of her own family. She tried to guilt-trip me, saying that I was abandoning her in her retirement and that she gave everything for me growing up. I reminded her that I am an adult, married, and responsible for my own household. I offered to help her find alternative living arrangements, including short-term rentals or assisted living communities for retirees, but she refused. The conflict escalated over the next few weeks. She began passive-aggressive tactics, leaving my personal items in the laundry with helpful notes like, "I fix your messy system," or intentionally forgetting to do chores she had agreed to handle. She also began showing up at Ethan's workplace unannounced, claiming she was checking up on him because he was not pulling his weight. Ethan and I both felt our privacy and autonomy were being violated, and it created tension in our marriage that we had never experienced before. I tried one final intervention. I told my mother that she would need to leave within 2 weeks if she continued to disrespect our household and marriage. I explained that this wasn't a decision made lightly, but that her repeated insults, manipulations, and disregard for our rules were unacceptable. She exploded, calling me ungrateful and cruel, claiming that I was letting my husband control my life, and that I was the worst daughter imaginable. At this point, I contacted a mediator, a family counselor, hoping to have a structured conversation and find some compromise. My mother refused to attend and insisted that counselors are a waste of time and just enable bad behavior. I also reached out to some friends and relatives for advice. They overwhelmingly supported my position, agreeing that boundaries are essential and that it is not unreasonable to refuse cohabitation with someone who disrespects the household and the people living in it. The situation has left me feeling guilty despite knowing I acted to protect my marriage and personal space. I love my mother and want her in my life, but I cannot tolerate her behavior anymore. Ethan has been supportive, telling me repeatedly that our home is for us and that prioritizing our marriage does not make me a bad daughter. However, my mother continues to call, email, and text, trying to guilt us into letting her stay. I've also considered offering day visits, weekly dinners, or trips together to maintain our relationship, but she insists that only moving in is acceptable. This makes me feel trapped and stressed, and it's impacting my mental health. So, AITA for refusing to let my mother move in with me after she repeatedly insulted my husband and tried to control her household. AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding because of her fiancé's behavior. This is going to be a long one, but I'll try to make it clear. I, 28F, have a younger sister, Emily, 25F. We were always close growing up, though as adults our relationship has been complicated. I have always tried to be there for her, even when our parents were difficult. Emily has always been a bit dramatic and very emotional, but I never thought it was a big problem until recently. Emily got engaged about a year ago to a man named Jason, 30M. When they started dating, I was cautiously optimistic because I wanted my sister to be happy. However, there were red flags from the beginning. Jason was controlling in ways that I tried to overlook because I didn't want to interfere. I did my best to stay neutral. But over the last year, his behavior has become more overt, and I honestly feel it crosses the line into emotional abuse. It started with small things. When we would have family dinners, Jason would make passive-aggressive comments about my career. I'm a graphic designer and work freelance, which means I have a flexible schedule. He would make remarks like, "Oh, you must be so bored all day," or "It must be nice to not have responsibilities." At first, I laughed it off, thinking he was joking, but the comments kept coming, and they weren't subtle jokes. They were meant to undermine me. Emily would shrug it off and say, "He's just joking, don't take it personally," but it never felt like a joke to me. The controlling behavior became more obvious when it came to Emily's life choices. He constantly questioned her decisions, from what kind of car she should buy to which friend she should spend time with. Emily seemed to accept it without question, but I could see it was wearing her down. I tried talking to her about it gently, but she became defensive and told me I was being dramatic and that I didn't understand their relationship. Things escalated when wedding planning began. I have always loved weddings, but this one quickly became stressful. Emily insisted that I help plan, but every time I suggested something, Jason would make it clear he had veto power. If I tried to suggest a caterer, he would dismiss it as too expensive, even though Emily could afford it. If I suggested a dress or decor idea, he would say it was not the kind of wedding we want. It got to the point where I felt like my input didn't matter at all, even though Emily asked me for help. The breaking point came last month. Emily asked me to help her with a small DIY project for the wedding. She wanted to make personalized centerpieces for the reception. I spent an entire weekend working on them and sent her pictures. She loved them and was excited, but when I got to her house to drop them off, Jason insisted on changing almost everything I had done. He criticized the design, colors, and materials. I tried to explain that Emily had approved it, but he said, "I'm the groom. This is my wedding too. You don't get a say in how things are done." I felt humiliated, and Emily didn't defend me. She just said, "Don't take it personally, he's just stressed." After that, I realized that Jason doesn't respect me or my relationship with Emily. I thought about confronting him directly, but Emily warned me not to make waves. Then, last week, Emily sent me a text asking if I would attend a family-only bridal shower she was hosting. I responded that I needed to think about it, and when I did, I realized I could not be around Jason without feeling anxious and upset. I tried explaining to Emily that his behavior had been hurtful and that I didn't feel safe being around him for an extended period. I offered to celebrate with her privately, maybe go out for dinner or do a small activity with just the two of us. I wanted to maintain our bond. Emily's reaction was immediate and harsh. She accused me of being selfish and controlling and said that I was ruining her wedding. She said that my refusal to attend the bridal shower was a huge betrayal and that I was letting my personal feelings destroy the family celebration. I told her that I loved her, that I wanted to be there for her, but that I could not subject myself to emotional abuse or be treated with disrespect by her fiancé. She hasn't spoken to me since. I reached out to my parents, hoping for some support or at least understanding. My mom said that while she understood my feelings, Emily is the bride, and I should bite the bullet and attend. My dad said that I was being dramatic and needed to prioritize family. I feel like everyone is siding with Jason and Emily just because they are planning a wedding. I don't want to ruin her day, but I also don't want to compromise my mental health. A few of my friends think I'm in the right, saying that I need to set boundaries and protect myself. Others are saying I'm overreacting and should just attend to keep the peace. I honestly feel torn, but the more I think about it, the more I realize that I cannot support a situation where someone I love is being manipulated and belittled, and I'm treated the same if I try to intervene. So, Reddit, AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding because of her fiancé's behavior. I've tried to explain, I've tried to compromise, and I've offered alternatives, but she and our family see me as the villain. I feel like if I go, I will be participating in enabling his behavior, and that makes me uncomfortable to the point of anxiety. I just want to know if I'm being unreasonable, selfish, or if I'm justified in standing my ground for my own mental health. Character count. 6573. Would you like me to draft a few variations with different twists on the wedding conflict theme? AITA for refusing to let my stepbrother move into my house, even though he claims he has nowhere else to go. 29F, have been living in a small house in a suburban area for the past 4 years. I live with my boyfriend, Mark, 31M, and our dog, Peanut. I'm a teacher, and Mark runs his own small business. So while our life isn't extravagant, we're comfortable. I also happen to have a very complicated family situation. My dad remarried when I was 12, and my stepmother brought her 2 kids into the family, Jake, 25M, and Lucy, 23F. I get along with Lucy just fine, but Jake and I have always had a tense relationship. Jake has never really been independent. He's been through a series of short-term jobs that never last more than a few months. He's also struggled with substance issues in the past, though he has been sober for a little over a year. I genuinely want him to stay sober, but he has a history of manipulative behavior, especially when it comes to family. About a month ago, Jake called my dad in tears, saying he had nowhere to live. He claimed his current roommate kicked him out, and he was sleeping in his car. My dad, who has always been more lenient with him, called me, asking if we could take Jake in temporarily until he got back on his feet. My dad's words were along the lines of, just for a couple of weeks. He's your brother, and he needs help. I know you can handle it. I immediately said no. Not out of spite, but for a few reasons. First, my house is small. We have 1 spare bedroom, which we use as an office, and even if Jake stayed in there, he'd have almost zero privacy. Second, I live with Mark, who is extremely particular about his space and schedule. Third, based on past experiences, I knew this would not just be a temporary situation. Every time Jake has stayed with family, it's ended up dragging on for months, with him becoming increasingly demanding. My dad insisted. He started sending me messages daily, explaining how desperate Jake was, how he had no one else to turn to, and even hinting that if I didn't help, he might never forgive me. Mark and I discussed it extensively, and he supported my decision. We decided we would offer to help Jake in other ways, like giving him money for a hotel or helping him find a cheap rental, but we drew a firm line. He could not move into our house. Things escalated when Jake decided to show up at my house without notice. I was at work, and Mark let him in, thinking it was okay to hear him out. When I got home, I found Jake sitting on our couch, looking miserable. He started crying and begging, saying things like, "I can't live in my car anymore. You're the only one who cares. Please, just this once." Mark tried to explain that we had talked about this, but Jake kept interrupting, getting more emotional and louder. I finally had to tell him to leave, which he did, but not without threatening that I would regret this and that I was heartless. After that day, my dad started taking my phone calls less frequently, and when we did speak, he sounded disappointed. My stepmother also chimed in, saying that I was selfish and that family should always help each other in times of need. I tried to explain our boundaries, mentioning past incidents where Jake overstayed and caused chaos, but she dismissed my concerns, saying I was overreacting. I've also faced backlash from my extended family. A few relatives sent me messages, basically shaming me for not being the bigger person and accusing me of being cold and uncaring. Some friends suggested that I should just let Jake move in temporarily and deal with it later, but they don't know our history, and I felt those suggestions were incredibly naive. On the other hand, I've been thinking a lot about whether I'm being unfair. Jake really does have nowhere to go, and I keep asking myself if I could handle the situation better. Could I have set stricter rules or prepared a system where he could stay in the spare room, but adhere to specific expectations? I'm worried that my refusal makes me look uncaring and that it's hurting my relationship with my dad and stepmother. Mark and I have started considering whether we can compromise, like maybe paying for a short-term Airbnb or helping him find a room in a shared apartment. But I keep worrying that Jake will see that as us giving in and will push for more than we can reasonably handle. We've tried to communicate our willingness to help in ways that don't involve him moving in, but Jake hasn't responded well to anything but direct offers of housing. The situation has been stressful, and it's causing tension in my family. I feel torn between wanting to help my stepbrother and protecting my home, my relationship, and my own mental health. I keep replaying the day he showed up uninvited, the pleading and the threats, and it makes me feel guilty. But I also remember the months of drama he caused every time he's lived with family in the past. So Reddit, AITA for refusing to let my stepbrother move into my house, even though he claims he has nowhere else to go. I feel like I'm being reasonable in protecting my home and life, but the constant pressure from family has me questioning myself. The situation has reached a point where my dad and stepmother are giving me the silent treatment when we speak on the phone, and I honestly don't know how to navigate the balance between supporting family and maintaining healthy boundaries. I just want to do what's right, but I don't want to lose my peace of mind or my relationship with Mark over something I feel is beyond my reasonable obligations. Character count, 6,389. AITA for refusing to let my best friend move in with me after she lost her apartment. Even though my boyfriend thinks I'm being unreasonable, I, 32F, have been in a relationship with my boyfriend, Jason, 34M, for 5 years. We live together in a 2-bedroom apartment in the city. I work as a software engineer, Jason is in finance, and both of us have relatively busy schedules. Our apartment is cozy but functional, and we've built a routine that works well for us. We value our personal space, especially since we both work from home a few days a week, and we've always made sure our living situation is calm and manageable. My best friend, Laura, 31F, has been a friend since college. She's smart, creative, and hilarious, but she's had a very unstable career path and has struggled with finances for years. I've helped her financially in small ways in the past, like covering a meal, giving her rides, or occasionally lending a small amount when she was short on rent. But I've always set boundaries because she tends to become dependent when she gets a taste of help. 2 weeks ago, Laura called me in a panic. She had just been evicted from her apartment because she couldn't pay rent for 3 months. She had nowhere else to go and asked if she could move in with me just until I get back on my feet. I felt torn because I care about her deeply, but I also knew that having her live here could quickly become a long-term arrangement, which would disrupt our lives. I told her I needed to think about it, and that we could discuss options like helping her find a temporary sublet, a short-term Airbnb, or even lending her some money to cover deposits. Jason, however, immediately said she should be allowed to move in, insisting that refusing would be cruel. He said I was being cold and overly rigid, and that since she's family to me in the emotional sense, we had to help her. I explained that helping doesn't always mean opening your home indefinitely, especially when past patterns suggested she might stay for months or longer if given the chance. Jason disagreed, saying I was overthinking and that I needed to be compassionate. After a few days, Laura showed up at our apartment, expecting to stay. I told her firmly that she could not move in permanently and that we needed to figure out a short-term solution. She became upset and accused me of abandoning her and being selfish. I reiterated that I could help her financially and with resources, but could not compromise my own home and routines. Jason got involved, saying I was being cruel to someone I care about, and that I needed to stop putting comfort above friendship. He argued that having Laura stay temporarily would not be a big deal and that I was unnecessarily stressing myself out. I explained that it is a big deal because we have a 2-bedroom apartment, 1 bedroom for us, 1 for the kids. I have a niece who stays occasionally, and no extra room for her. I also pointed out that our apartment is small, our dog needs space, and our work-from-home schedules could not accommodate a 3rd adult constantly in the apartment. Laura then suggested that she could sleep on the couch, which I declined because our couch is uncomfortable for long-term sleeping, and I didn't want to create resentment or strain in the household. I also mentioned that she tends to be messy and a little careless with other people's things. Jason argued that I was assuming the worst and that she would be careful. I told him I was not assuming. I had seen the patterns in her behavior before. Over the next few days, the tension escalated. Laura was clearly frustrated and sent me multiple texts saying I don't value our friendship and that I never have my friends' backs. Jason would often intervene in these texts, saying things like, "See, you're being unfair," which made me feel like both of them were ganging up on me. I try to be calm and reasonable, offering to help her find listings, co-sign a short-term lease, or help her financially, but all my suggestions were dismissed because they didn't involve moving in. At this point, our apartment has become very tense. Jason is upset with me, Laura is upset with me, and I feel like I'm constantly defending boundaries I think are reasonable. Jason accuses me of lacking empathy and says that if I truly cared about Laura, I would find a way to make it work. He also said that my refusal is causing unnecessary drama and making both of them feel unwelcome. I reminded him that helping doesn't always mean living together. I'm trying to help her in ways that don't jeopardize her household. Some friends say I'm right to protect my home and my mental health, but others say I should just let Laura stay for a little while and figure out later. I feel guilty, but I also feel exhausted. I already have my own responsibilities, work, and mental load, and adding Laura to the mix long-term feels unsustainable. I want to help her, but I can't compromise my own household indefinitely. So, AITA for refusing to let my best friend move in after she lost her apartment, even though my boyfriend thinks I'm being unreasonable and cruel. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos also. Leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.